do you look at that bull market versus the previous ones that you have seen?
So it's kind of interesting, right? Because I was studying Bitcoin when it went up to 20K in 2017. Then it went down to like 3,000 or 4,000, and then it was like hanging out around 10,000 when I started buying in 2019. And then it went down during COVID. In 2020, it went back down to like $4,000 or $4,500, if I remember correctly. It dropped like 50% in one day, and then it started to climb back up, and then we got all the way to, it went down to like 4,000 in 2020, and then by the end of 2021, it was like at 69,000, and so it did more than 10x, right? And in those days, like you didn't like in 2017, you had like no companies buying Bitcoin. You had no countries even interested in Bitcoin. And then in 2021, you had like Sailors started buying in August. MicroStrategy started buying in August of 2020, right? And so that was after COVID. And I think his first buys were like at 11,000, and then it dropped to 10,000, and everyone was freaking out. Oh, he's lost all this, like not Bitcoiners, but the media. Oh, he's made this huge bet and he's lost all this money. And then he bought more when it dropped from like 11 to 10 or 11 to 9,000. And that's what Sailor's been doing this whole time, right? He just keeps buying. And then, and then you also had in 2021, you had El Salvador said, okay, we're going to start buying. They started buying in September of 2021. And, they basically started buying at the top, which is fine because then they bought all the way down and now they've been buying all the way back up, and they were hated on for a few years. But I agree, like those times you only had like El Salvador and MicroStrategy in the last bull markets, and Bitcoin's doing crazy numbers, right? From the bottom to the top, way more than a 10x. And so if you think, okay, from the bottom of this cycle, which was like 15K, well, 10x would be 150K. And you're not seeing the crazy growth when you're seeing like, okay, MicroStrategy is like on steroids of how they used to be buying Bitcoin. You have 21 Capital coming out. You have Bhutan, some random country in Asia, right, saying they're mining Bitcoin. El Salvador is just bragging about how much Bitcoin they're buying. You have, Dylan LeClaire is running this company that they're buying Bitcoin in Japan, while Japan is like going through a debt, like a sovereign currency crisis. And so you have all of these crazy things that are going on where, there's way more companies buying Bitcoin. And every day you look up, there's a new company buying it. And so I think Nico's spot on. It's been the most interesting, plus the ETFs, right? Like, don't forget about the ETFs that are going on. So it makes you wonder if these people are actually buying Bitcoin, right? Like, that is the true question. Are they buying Bitcoin, or are they buying IOUs to their Bitcoin? Are they custodying it? Are they verifying on chain that they're actually buying Bitcoin? Or are these just a bunch of IOUs, like how they did paper gold? Is this papered over Bitcoin? Because you would think that the price would be pumping a lot harder. Maybe as the price is pumping, there's a lot of OGs that are selling, right? You're going to have OGs that sell. That's just natural, right? If you're worth nothing, right? You've been like a janitor, but you knew what Bitcoin was. And now your net worth is like $75 million or $100 million. You're not going to go out and buy some ranch or a property. You're not going to sell some of your Bitcoin. And that's the thing, is like when I started getting into it, it was all about, Bitcoin is in a few hands. It's not decentralized because it's so centralized. And it's like, well, you don't understand what those even mean. And so I think there are OGs that are selling, which is great for Bitcoin, because then Bitcoin will naturally move hands. And to those who maybe don't feel like they have enough Bitcoin, they're still trying to stack and grow their percentage. And for those who feel like, I kind of have my stack, those are the people that are selling, but I would say I kind of agree with Nico. It is really interesting to see how many institutions and countries now are starting to buy Bitcoin. And like, you feel like, there's like, is Saudi Arabia buying? Is there these other countries that are buying, but they're buying on down on the down low and no one knows about it yet? That's probably the best strategy. United States is like, yeah, we're gonna start buying, whatever that means. Like the SBR really didn't prove to be anything that I thought it could have been, or that it maybe should have been. But I think that's better overall that the United States, even though I'm American, I'm glad that there's not this huge country buying Bitcoin just yet. So there could be a lot of paper buying, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Maybe there's not, but you would think that the price of Bitcoin would be going up like to 200K or 300K with all of these announcements that keep happening.
Yeah, it's like I don't think personally that they actually do it, but the more and more they buy and the less the price moves, the more suspicious I get of exactly that. The thing that why, for example, BlackRock, like what incentive would they have to? They have so much money. If there's something fishy going on, like also with Coinbase, I don't think. I don't know. It's really hard. Like, why would they do it if they risk everything to get a little bit more? Because Coinbase has a great business model. BlackRock has a great business model. But yeah, it's something interesting going on. Maybe it's also just like the lack of retail interest currently. But this does not move the price. BlackRock should move the price way more. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, you would think that, institutions are ran by people, right? And so it would make sense that in this kind of first institutional wave, you're going to have these institutions act the same way that retail acts, just at a bigger level, right? That countries are going to act the same way that retail acts, just at a bigger level. And so, like, it would make sense to me that we're going to have these run-ups, but it's institutional run-up, and then that they're going to sell because they're scared or they don't know what to do, or they feel like they timed it right, and they're going to get in the trade, and then they're going to take profits and get out of the trade because they don't really understand what it is that they own just yet. And so you would imagine that there would be institutions kind of doing a similar thing. I would imagine, and maybe I'm giving too much credit to Michael Saylor, but again, I guess maybe I've become a big Michael Saylor fan. So I would imagine that he is verifying on chain that Coinbase actually has his Bitcoin. I would imagine that that's going on. With other institutions, I'm just not so sure, right? Am I so sure that a BlackRock is verifying on chain that Coinbase is custodying their Bitcoin? I feel like there could be a lot of trust going on. I could be, in all of those ETFs, I feel like there could be a lot of trust between these ETFs and Coinbase or whoever, that they're actually buying the Bitcoin, they're verifying on chain. And, or who's to say that, that they're telling one ETF and another ETF and they're pointing to the same address and they're saying, here's your Bitcoin, right? How do they, how, like, a proof of reserve is an interesting thing, because a proof of reserve, if the two parties don't know, and it's kind of kept private, a proof of reserve could be if Coinbase is custodying, 10 different ETFs Bitcoin, but then they point to the same addresses. Here's your Bitcoin, here's your Bitcoin, and then they can go and verify, okay, there's Bitcoin there. Well, they don't control the keys to that Bitcoin, so how do they know that that's their Bitcoin and it's not another ETF's Bitcoin, or it's not Coinbase's holding Bitcoin? So how do they know for sure? And the answer is they don't, right? They don't know. And so that could be another way that trust is being implemented into the system. When you're using a custodian, those are the issues that you can run into. And so that's why I would just be a little weary that I don't know for sure if all the Bitcoin that they say is getting bought is actually getting bought, or if it's just getting papered over.
Yeah, we need public transparency for proof of reserve, of saying, hey, those are the 5 biggest positions and this is the address for that, and for all the rest of it, like there is another address. So like proof of reserve, I think, will have to be the standard at some point, because people will not trust anyone holding their Bitcoin at some point. if they cannot even prove if they actually hold it.
Yeah, like the guy for MicroStrategy, who's not Michael Saylor's, like a different guy who's kind of, I don't think he's the CEO, but I think he runs some different, I don't know what he does, but he was posting on Twitter, and people were trying to get MicroStrategy to post proof of reserves, and then he comes out and he goes and he gives them like their 10Q or whatever, which is like their filing to the SEC government, right? To the SEC, and they go, okay. He goes, well, in here it says that we own the Bitcoin, right? In this government document, it says that we own the Bitcoin, and like that's not proof of reserves, buddy. Like show us the addresses. Show us the addresses. That's the proof of reserve. And so, yeah, imagine if Coinbase came out for everyone that they custody Bitcoin for, and they said, here's the proof of reserves for the addresses for MicroStrategy. Here's for the ETFs for BlackRock, for IBIT, and here's for this other ETF and this other ETF and this other ETF. Then plebs could go around, or Bitcoiners could go around and actually verify, okay, this is all correct. The Bitcoin is actually in these addresses, and this is addresses for this one, this addresses for that one. But if it's kind of all done behind closed doors, how does MicroStrategy know? And see, this is the big point too for Michael Saylor. Even if Coinbase comes to him and says, we are custodying your Bitcoin, and they give him proof of reserve and the address, how does he know that that's not IBIT's Bitcoin? How does he know that that's not Coinbase's Bitcoin? How does he know that's not anyone else's Bitcoin other than his? Because he doesn't have the keys. So that is a really interesting thing to think about when it comes to proof of reserves. If you're a custodian, you can't just give these private proof of reserves back to whoever you're custodying for. You actually would need to make it public so everyone could verify. And if there's another company that you're custodying for, they can go, well, no, that's our address too, And so as they do that, I don't know what the downfall is. If you're going to come out and say if you're going to file in your SEC filings, this is how much Bitcoin we hold. What's the downfall to posting a proof of reserve? I don't see I don't understand what the attack vector is, because you're already showing that you have Bitcoin, a certain amount of Bitcoin. So I don't understand what the attack vector is by posting the address to where that Bitcoin is actually held. That doesn't make sense to me, why they wouldn't do that.
It's very true. I think proof of reserve has to be the standard. It's something that if you don't do that, there will come a point where if you don't do that, people will not trust in what you are saying.
Yeah.
Trust will always be replaced by verification.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue with Coinbase, is because Coinbase has kind of been this leader for like a decade, more than a decade, in Bitcoin and crypto, right? Whatever crypto is. And they've been able to create this system where people trust them to custody their Bitcoin, or institutions trust them to custody their Bitcoin. And it's very interesting because they don't really have a Bitcoin ethos at Coinbase. They have a very big fiat ethos at Coinbase. And so maybe it'll take something like Coinbase really blowing up, although I just don't see how that could happen, because now, once you start custodying Bitcoin for like BlackRock, you got the Federal Reserve behind you, so I don't know how they'll blow up like an FTX. But again, that was the whole thing with BlockFi. The institutions are here. You're safe. And you can't just play these fiat games forever. And I don't like how Coinbase is kind of trying to control the narrative of this is how the custody should be done, because I think they're doing it wrong. So maybe there needs to be another company that comes around and can custody better with proof of reserves. And maybe that's what the free market needs. So maybe if we're trying to make some money out there to buy more Bitcoin, maybe we need to create a company that actually custodies Bitcoin for institutions that shows proof of reserves. maybe that's what the market might want.
Thank you for watching this video. This was only a snippet of the podcast. And if you want to watch the full episode and get all of the context of this episode, you can click right here or here. Oh, maybe also here.